Hello everyone, and welcome to my first response video. This episode is going to be addressed to a YouTuber called SquattingSlavTV and his video called Ben and Milo are deceiving you. So before I begin, I just want to say that I actually think that SquattingSlav did a decent job at keeping his video information based rather than just calling the subjects names, although he did do that in some parts. But if I thought he was being malicious, I wouldn't have made this response. I also want to fully disclose that I am a fan of Ben and Milo's, as I said in my People Who Inspire Me video. I would never say that this video is fully objective, but I did the best I could to keep it that way. And finally, because SquattingSlavTV's video is older than mine, I don't think it's fair to use current articles to address things he couldn't have known about at the time he made his video, so I'm only going to use articles and references that he would have had available to him at that time. So let's get to it.
SquattingSlavTV. Over the course of the last 2 years, both Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos have traveled across the US and internationally to speak about the evils of identity politics and especially white nationalism. These events typically attract thousands of young people, and because they're normally hosted in cities that are SJW hellholes, the security and policing fees accompanying these events are oftentimes running in the hundreds and thousands of dollars. When Ben Shapiro spoke in Berkeley in September, the security fees were estimated to be around $600,000, and Milo's recent event in Sydney also came with a $50,000 security price tag. Multiply this by a couple of events each year, and you're looking at a hell of a lot of money being spent on protecting a short guy and a gay guy whose battle to save free speech has been anything but free.
So, the tone here makes it sound like Ben and Milo profit off their security fees, and that they themselves are the cause of those fees. Neither of the speakers set their own security costs. The destructive groups outside the building set those costs. Seeing your other videos, I know you aren't a fan of Antifa, and I'm genuinely curious as to why you blame the speakers for the security that is meant to stop the attackers. Moreover, both Ben and Milo put up plenty of free content on YouTube for people to listen to, so you can't really say that their speaking has been anything but free when they give out plenty of free content.
All of these high costs aside, what's more troubling is that these two prominent conservative pundit speakers are pushing a hypocritical agenda that their masses of based Trump supporters seem to be completely blind to. As we all know, Ben Shapiro is a proud Jew and has openly called himself a Zionist on several occasions. Basically, Zionism is the belief that Judaism is both a religion and an ethnicity, and that based on this, Jews deserve their own ancestral homeland in Israel. Milo, just like Ben, is also a Jew because according to matrilineality in Judaism, those who are born with a Jewish mother, as is Milo, are automatically themselves Jewish by blood. Although Milo insists that he was raised predominantly as a Catholic when speaking to the masses and continually tries to downplay his Jewish ancestry, it's not very hard to realize that his Jewish identity is actually a big part of him, his ideologies, and his values. With all of this now in the open, you kind of have to ask yourself why it is that both of these guys, who are so openly proud of their Jewish identity, so harshly condemn and demonize identity politics, and especially white identity politics and nationalism.
I made this clip fairly large because there's a lot I can address here pretty quickly. The claim is that Ben and Milo are being deceptive, and to intro his point, he is saying, essentially, look, both of these guys are Jews and live by Jewish values. And for the most part, Slav is correct. They do live by Jewish values, but I don't fully understand where the deception lies. Judeo-Christian values are the basis of American values, however faded they are today. And Slav never makes a distinction between the values that these Jews have versus the values that the US has. In order to deceive someone, you have to get the deceived to believe something other than what they already believe by nefarious means. But Slav makes a slight shift in his hypothesis where he says they are being deceptive to they are being hypocritical. Second, when Slav asks why are these Jews demonizing identity politics when they are so proudly Jewish, that's a good question. But again, there's a failure to make a distinction here. Nowhere in any of the speeches by either Ben or Milo do they make the point that you as a person need to have zero identity and that you shouldn't belong to any group anywhere. They both make the point that values, i.e. things to believe in, are vastly more important than belonging to groups that are based on something arbitrary, like skin color, sexuality, gender, or victimhood.
Ben Shapiro can be a proud Zionist Jew and stand by the idea of an exclusively Jewish homeland, then why is he so bothered if a white American wants the same for his country, or if a Swede or a German want the same for their countries?
So the question here is, why is Ben so bothered if other countries want to be exclusive like Israel, basically? And this isn't exactly a one-to-one comparison. One country, Israel, wants to be value exclusive, while in your case, another country, America presumably, might want to be race exclusive. Those really aren't a fair comparison, because one is based on what you think and the other is based on what you look like. These are some things that need to be distinguished because the overgeneralization here conflicts with itself. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. I can start a country and say, only people who don't want murder can enter. And you can start a country and say, no Irish need apply. With your argument, you're saying I'm a hypocrite if I stand with my murder is wrong statement, while I also say that discriminating against the Irish is wrong. I can stand by my principles and still criticize what you think. For Ben to be a hypocrite here, he would have to say something akin to what you think he is saying, which is, Jews can have their own country, but Germans or Swedes can't. In other words, Ben is saying you can have a country of principles, but a country based on things like skin will not work. If Ben was saying what you claim he is, you would be correct.
When asked about his own ethnic identity, Ben Shapiro made it very clear that he identifies first and foremost as a Jew whose loyalty is to Israel, and then secondly as an American.
And what is the distinction in values you are talking about here? If Ben says he prefers traditional Jewish values over current, changing American values, he isn't being deceptive. He's actually being forthright about what he believes. And again, this isn't a fair comparison. When you claim Zionism wants to be seen as an ethnicity, you make it seem as though Jews can be compared to other ethnic groups. And maybe they can be. Maybe I have a misunderstanding of what ethnicity means. I can admit that. But you're going to have to clarify for me how Jews can practice their Jewish ethnicity, but whites can't practice white ethnicity. With one being based on values and the other being based on skin, this is where I'm having trouble understanding the comparison.
Therefore, when you go to one of these based Shapiro events, you're actually going to an event where the speaker believes in putting Jewish values first and American values second.
There's still no distinction being made here.
Sadly, the cult-like followers of both Ben and Milo don't seem to realize this at all, because both of these guys have done such an excellent job in diverting their audience's attention off of identity politics and instead shifting it onto shared values such as the protection of free speech.
Just to do a quick recap, here's what Slav said at the beginning of his video.
Both Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos have traveled across the US and internationally to speak about the evils of identity politics and especially white nationalism.
And here's what he's saying now.
Both of these guys have done such an excellent job in diverting their audience's attention off of identity politics and instead shifting it onto shared values such as the protection of free speech.
While Slav is calling Ben and Milo hypocrites, he is saying on one hand that they only talk about the demonization of identity politics, while on the other hand they are trying not to talk about it at all and subvert your attention by only talking about values. I really can't follow that logic given the video thus far.
On top of this, Ben Shapiro, who has stated on numerous occasions that he condemns violence from the side of SJWs, has been a proud supporter of US intervention in Syria and the toppling of Assad's regime.
There are all these pictures of dead children who have been gassed to death by the Bashar Assad regime. And that comes just a few days after the Trump administration came out and said Assad would remain in power.
Ben condemns violence from SJWs because their goal is to stop him from speaking by means of force. This isn't comparable to international warfare with a country that gasses its own citizens. In my opinion, a neighbor that gasses its own people should be warded off from gassing you or your allies.
As we know, Syria and Israel aren't exactly on the best of terms, yet Ben thinks it's perfectly acceptable to support a war in which young Americans will lose their lives to serve the interests of Israel.
Israel doesn't own America or their soldiers. The US voluntarily sends their troops over because of the alliance they share with Israel. There is a mutual benefit to this as well. While I'm not a well-studied student of the militaries of the world, I can tell you with certainty that Israel has top-of-the-line military weaponry and personnel training that is second to none. Videos on their weapons or their training methods aren't hard to find, and they are widely acknowledged for their expertise. Again, in my opinion, I think that is well worth protecting. Ben's reasoning may be different from my own, but he is well within reason to say that he is against a Syrian invasion and against violence from SJWs.
Much like Ben, Milo has also been extremely shifty with identity politics from the time that he started gaining popularity. 2 years ago in the pre-election era, Milo bragged about being part of the alt-right when the movement was painted by the mainstream media as a bunch of white trolls with Pepe memes, but then distanced himself when the media learned that the alt-right was about identity politics. Basically, Milo rode the wave of the alt-right when it brought him media attention and popularity at a time when the movement wasn't clearly defined by the media, and then jumped off of it and began to demonize it as soon as it began to conflict with his own views of identity. Milo has also continually equated nationalism and identity politics with white supremacy, and has always tried to downplay and subvert these movements by making it seem as if anyone questioning Jewish involvement in politics was simply trolling.
This entire segment only takes the perspective of the mainstream media. The mainstream media doesn't get to define what you are or when. If Slav is trying to convince me that Milo is an identity politics pundit, he has to show me Milo's writings and what Milo is saying, rather than what the mainstream media is saying. If Slav is going to strawman Milo's arguments, he could at least show me where the Milo article came from, rather than tell me what the media thinks it says. I don't watch mainstream media for a good reason. It's because I don't care about their opinions.
Sadly, Milo is nothing but an opportunist who uses an artificial conservative cloak to normalize things such as pedophilia.
I agree that Milo can be an opportunist, and that Milo joking about pedophilia isn't something I can defend for obvious reasons. However, I think it is important to listen to Milo's perspective on this.
I've reviewed the tapes that appeared a few days ago in the proper context, and I don't believe that they say what is being reported. Nonetheless, I do say some things on the tapes that I do not mean, and which do not reflect my views. My experiences as a victim led me to believe that I could say almost anything on this subject, no matter how outrageous. But I understand that my usual blend of sassy, gay British sarcasm, provocation, and gallows humor might have come across as flippancy. A lack of care for other victims, or even worse, as seems to have been the case in reports, advocacy. I'm horrified by that impression. I would like to restate my disgust at adults who sexually abuse minors. I'm horrified by pedophilia, and I have devoted large portions of my career to exposing child abusers. I've exposed 3 of them in my reporting, which is 3 more than most of my critics.
Does this have anything to do with Slav's original claim? Not really. But as I say in my first video, I want to make sure that all sides get to speak, and then you can make the judgment for yourself.
The fact that an entire generation of young conservatives in America worships a feminized gay man who brags about having a black boyfriend isn't only sad, but also goes to show how conservative values are slowly being degraded and penetrated by sheer degeneracy.
Okay, first, Slav is making a character attack here. Let's say that it is sad for conservatives to worship a feminized gay man with a black boyfriend. He has yet to explain how that justifies his original claim of Milo being a hypocrite or deceptive. Slav can call Ben and Milo as many names as he wants, but if he can't prove his point, then why make a video about it?
Overall, both Ben and Milo have done an excellent job in demonizing identity politics in America, all the while sneakily shoving their identity politics down the throats of young Americans.
They promote an identity to values, and reject identity based on things like race, sexuality, and victimhood.
While I obviously support the idea of every people on this earth being proud of their identity, I don't support the hypocrisy of people like Ben and Milo who tell others to abandon identity politics, all the while pushing these very same kinds of politics for their own benefit.
White pride, white nationalism, white supremacy isn't the way to go. The way to go is reminding them and yourselves that you should be aspiring to values and to ideas.
I didn't add that Milo clip. That was in Slav's original video and proves the point I have been trying to make this whole time. The idea that Ben and Milo reject identity politics wholesale is incorrect. If that statement is incorrect, then the title of Slav's video, Ben and Milo Are Deceiving You, is based on a falsehood and is therefore also incorrect.
Next time you go to watch either of these guys destroy feminists or wreck SJWs, just remember there's a much bigger agenda going on with both of them than meets the eye.
Not really. If you watch any of their Q&A videos, they pretty much tell you upfront what they believe. I hope that anyone who watched this can agree that Slav did a significant amount of strawmanning in this video. I played as much of his video as I could to make sure I didn't take anything he said out of context. Let me know if you think I missed something, was wrong on a point, or maybe missed the mark entirely. I put a lot of work into this video, but I will happily acknowledge that I am wrong if it can be proven. Before I close this video, I just want to say that my goal was not to shut Slav down or shut him out of the conversation. I think his premise and his argument were incorrect, and I made the case against it. I strongly encourage anyone seeing this to watch his video for yourself and see whom you agree with. I want to stress that I don't care about winning a debate. I want to know what's true. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope you enjoyed.